Hi, Ben. It's so nice to meet you, man.
Hey,
First off,
Chris.
I love the episode. And it's great to see you again. I missed you on this last
Thank
season of
you.
Westworld.
Oh, thank you, man. That means a lot. I loved playing that asshole so much.
I could
He was
imagine.
so much fun. He was so naughty. It was just so much fun to go to work every day and think how much of a mess am I allowed to make?
I love that. Well, you get to play a lot in this one, I feel like.
Mm.
How'd you feel about the mustache? I liked it. And I mean, you got the beard now, but I thought you rocked it. I gotta say, I held out all summer on a stash after the Top Gun craze. I wasn't gonna do it. And then a few nights ago, I saw your stash and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna
I love it.
let it grow out.
Are you going to get rid of the rest of the beard and just have the stash?
I don't know if I can do. I don't have the confidence to go full clean shaven. I probably don't have like the nice square that you have either.
I think you just need a hat and a waistcoat of some kind.
This is good advice. I appreciate that.
November is coming up. You got to do it.
This is my excuse. And my girlfriend's been begging me to grow out my facial hair anyway because I think she hates my face. I think she wants me to cover as much of it as possible. So
She just loves you.
no. So real quick, what's the one question
We auditioned a few mustaches for that because we were filming the 3 timelines because it's set over 25 years. The character's supposed to be sort of about 20-ish at the beginning, early 20s, and then sort of mid 40s by the end of it. And we were flipping back and forth, sometimes on the same day between playing, 20 something and 40 something. And we auditioned a few different mustaches and then we eventually found the one.
Did you ever have any little curls to it or anything like that?
The original suggestion was this little Errol Flynn one, and I was like, no, it needs a bit of walrus meat. It needs a bit of it needs something. It needs a bit more power and gravitas to it. And then we started adding the bits of gray in the hair, and it was a good transformative kind of process to make. Yeah, and as soon as I would get the gray in the hair and the moustache and the different clothes, it would sort of weigh you down in a different way. You would feel, it was really fun for me.
You just felt tired all of a sudden?
You do? Yeah, I did. And then when we would do the sort of like the clean young guy with the slightly more, he would have these sort of like easy, better fitting kind of suits, and that you would feel that this kind of much more passionate kind of youthful, hopeful energy that would kind of push you through those days as well. It was I loved that part of making it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, were you already a fan of H.P. Lovecraft before you signed on to do this?
So I wasn't a huge. I hadn't consumed a lot of his stories, but I did love Lovecraft Country, the show, and so that kind of turned me on to it more. So I started reading a few of the stories after that, and hadn't come across the Pickman's Model story until this came up, and it's actually quite dry. The story itself is very deep into the sort of the art theme, which I think is, obviously kind of fascinating about how people's art drawn from the world, drawn from imagination can evoke responses of emotion, but can evoke people's, desires, but also kind of elicit fear or understanding or whatever it might be, connection with somebody based on something that you've painted or a song that you've written or a set of 8 stories that you've curated in the horror medium for Netflix. But whatever that expressive medium is, the way that it can affect other people is obviously on the very surface of this particular episode. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. No, so when you appear in an anthology series like this, like, did you read any of the other scripts and you chose Pickman's Model, or was this a situation where they came to you and said, we want you to be Thurber?
No, it was very much Thurber in this story. And I thought, do you know what? I've played like 4 period artists and painters in my life. And one one very well-known person who has a portrait painted of them in Dorian Gray.
You're talking about a certain Dorian Gray?
Yeah, well, it sort of felt a bit Dorian Gray 2.0. And I thought I've kind of covered a lot of these themes before, but then I got to the last pages and my reactions were visceral. I was reading the stage directions again. Does that say what I think it says? And it was just making me so uncomfortable. I was like, I have to be. And then finding out it was part of Guillermo del Toro's kind of anthology, and that he would be designing these monsters himself. And he was obviously part of taking this story from this sort of dry short story into this very human story about the connection between these two people and their kind of shared drive to express ambition and love and hope and fear and the dark parts of the world and the things that you can't help but be drawn to,
right?
And the things that you can't help express. And, I think I find that I understand that medium of like feeling like I don't know how to express this unless it's musical. I don't know how to express this unless it's in an image. I don't sometimes have the words, even though I love words, So, I was just drawn to the humanity of the story, and then very creeped out by it.
Oh, that I think that visceral response to the ending is exactly how I felt when I watched it. I was just, I don't want to say any spoilers in case people watch this haven't seen it yet, but I was like, holy shit. Like that's they just went there.
Well, what's really interesting to me, I don't really love like creepy horror stuff. I haven't watched a lot of it. But I love like that kind of psychological, the stuff which really messes with you, that makes you feel like it's your fault, or that makes you feel like it must be something that you've done or something I think that stuff is the stuff which freaks me out in real life. And so to have this character be like, it must be the war, it must be this relationship, it must be my kind of failing ambition, it must be kind of PTSD, it must be something. And then actually to have it sort of feel like it is the outside world sometimes. And it is just that the world is a dark, dark place sometimes.
I think there's also this natural human ego thing also sometimes to blame ourselves for things that are really outside of our control. But we think because we did or did not do something that somehow it's channeled this, bigger thing than us that, I think that's a fascinating human idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved that that's what this very creepy story was kind of scratching away at. And, the director and particularly Crispin Glover as well, like having the two of them, Keith Thomas and Crispin, they took such glee in my discomfort. And I was like, can't we just look at something hopeful and loving and beautiful? And they were just like, no, but look at this, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
And kind of their sort of shared curiosity and their knowledge of art as well, the two of them. And, and me just being more of this character, like wanting to sort of protect and wanting to, look for the hope and the heart in things. And he sort of almost by mistake cast these two people who had a sort of deep ideology about what art can be for and should be used for.
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you brought up Crispin too, because I have long been fascinated by that guy. And I talked to him yesterday, and he just has such an interesting perspective on so many subjects. And I just want to know what your experience was like working with a legend like Crispin Glover.
Well, exactly. A lot, almost exactly what you just said. His curiosity and his knowledge. You could bring up any subject and he will have some connection to it. I think he's deeply fascinated by this kind of macabre imagery as well, and the darkness in the world, and actually using his own imagination to express the darker side of things, sometimes in complete antithesis to what he believes about a particular subject or opinion, which I think is like such a compelling and bold way to attack art. And he takes a very long time over making his art, and we're interested in the connections between people and all of those things. And we would sit there for a long time, when we were rehearsing scenes, to discuss like who would open the door for whom in this particular scene, and how long would they stand there, and is it uncomfortable, or do they understand each other in this moment? And those are the things that I'm interested in, but I think for different reasons. And I think obviously, Back to the Future is a huge movie for me. Just to have him be a bit of a sort of icon in that way, from that performance, I think helped me see Pickman in this kind of slightly more other light, which was very useful. But then for him to be so knowledgeable and curious and kind of his approaches and attitudes to things was sometimes so odd to me that I just found his character work so compelling. And the walk and the accent and all of that stuff was just fascinating. But then to find things that you had common ground on was also like really rewarding.
Ben, I'm going to run out of time, and I got to ask one thing with you. I work for ComicBook.com, so I apologize in advance. I will get yelled at if I don't ask one question about this. So obviously, Marvel's brought back Daredevil and Kingpin. If Punisher came back, if Jigsaw was to be brought back, would you like to play a continuation of your character that you did for Netflix, or a new version of the character? Or would you just like an opportunity to leave Jigsaw behind and play someone else completely different?
Great questions. I loved playing that character. I loved kind of like discovering through the course of the show that we did on Netflix, discovering this kind of like abused child inside of this psychopathic, unhinged, scarred Marine body. And I loved that, how unpredictable he was, in terms of, you never know if he's going to kind of stab you or kiss you, or if he's going to like scream in rage and fire a machine gun at you, or he's going to sit in the corner and rock himself. I just thought that, like, I loved playing that character for that reason. It was so much fun. I loved working with John, so I would absolutely play that character again. I would like to see a more gnarly version of him, even in terms of the way he looks. Maybe we could beat him up again. Maybe we could smash his face into something again, but he's very dead in the canon. I think we sort of did tie up that story in a quite a satisfying way. So I don't hold out a lot of hope for that. Also, I think I've spent the last 5 or 6 years playing people with questionable morality and questionable motives, people who are, downright evil and, or very high up on the sort of douchebag chart. So, I would like to take what I've learned from that and channel it into someone that you're rooting for, I think. If I came back, anywhere in Marvel, if there was room for me somewhere. But I'm a huge fan, a huge consumer of all of the shows and movies and everything. And so, proud of like Charlie Cox and all those people who are kind of just becoming the sort of ultimate version of the characters that they're playing. So, in the meantime, I'm just going to be a fan.
All right. Well, fingers crossed, man. I hope to see you again in the future. Thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time to talk with me. I really appreciate you.
Great. So thanks, Chris.